KKK, all these pro-white movements, Proud Boys, pro-white and anti-everybody else. And historically, pro-black movements have always been pro-LGBTQ, pro-poor. They're pro-common people. They are.
There has been a very long and documented history of violent racism, specifically against African Americans, in the United States. For many, the American Constitution and the laws brought forth as such seem just and without question. For so many Americans, they believe that the era of racism, at least in America, is over, and that we need to collectively move past it. They seem to think it is some blip or blemish in history, but in reality, this is hundreds of years of systemic torture and injustice. But what if racism in America isn't a blemish or an era, but what if it's a cog in the design? Far longer than 250 years ago, the Atlantic slave trade commenced as one of the gravest crimes against humanity. Acts of cannibalism, breeding grounds for enslaved human beings, public lynchings by whipping or burning, not just by hanging. For over 550 years, colonial powers allowed for the enslavement and torture of millions of innocent people. The history of racial violence and oppression in the United States specifically has been going on for over 400 years. This continues to wreak havoc on individuals and our community alike. All the while, there is this insistence that after the Civil Rights Movement, racism ended. But more so than an ending, it was actually a pivot in the history of racism in the United States. And this pivot, to me, is highlighted by a term known as white defensiveness. Or you might have heard of white denial. These terms are interchangeable and both refer to the denial, diversion, and fragility of white supremacists in America or the accomplices of such. The idea that racism is over, or that there are no systemic or structural injustices in the modern day, the idea that white privilege does not exist, or the insistence of the Great Replacement theory, are all absurd when you take into account the generations of enslaved people who were and are subjected to an incomprehensible amount of physical and psychological damage that this widespread abuse has caused. The psychological effects of racism on both the victim and the perpetrator is something that has long interested me, as I live in a predominantly white area. At least subconsciously, I've always noticed this sort of denial or jump to defense which occurs when structural inequalities are brought up. That's why today we'll be going over a brief history of the racist and harmful tactics that were used to systemically as well as physically harm African Americans. And more importantly, we're going to try to break down the psychology by both the victim and the perpetrator of this racism. With me today, I have University of Memphis alumni Josh Casey. Josh has a bachelor's in psychology and is currently en route to getting his master's as a licensed social worker. He's a counselor working with at-risk demographics and has a strong passion for the marginalized and oppressed, which drives what he does. And as well, he has a passion for African American U.S. history and science, which is only natural since he is from Memphis, born and raised. Throughout the making and editing of this video, several pivotal moments in history had taken place. Some more notable than others, but the acknowledgement of slavery as the greatest crime against humanity, the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act, the arrest and aggravated assault committed by Chet the Builder, the non-guilty verdict in the murder of Cyrus Carmack Belton, the guilty verdict in the case of Carmela Anthony, and the murder of Cohen Wiley, who was not even 2 years old when the police shot into their mother's car, killing them. But first, before we had discussed the actual psychology behind racism, we had to lay some groundwork and really give you, the viewer, a good grasp on just how much damage has been done to us as a people after slavery ended. This short period gave way for black civilizations to thrive under conditions it had never seen until this point: freedom. During this time, radical white supremacists, or Confederates, not only terrorized these communities, committing violent acts of savage terrorism, but they also used different laws and regulatory systems to ensure that Black Americans, as a labor force, stayed in place. Throughout and after Reconstruction, we see the beginning of suppressive tactics, or what turned into Jim Crow laws, start to form. During Reconstruction, many of these new governments in the South that enacted laws to keep slave labor alive and well. These laws included vagrancy-based laws, which made it illegal to not have a job or home, loiter, or simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I know about vagrancy laws, which are essentially laws that's criminalizing your life. Like you're newly free slave, quote unquote, and they basically criminalize you for not having a job, walking on the side of the road the wrong way, like walking on a side of, I forgot if it was like the right or the left side of the train tracks. They'll take you to jail and make you a slave again. It's like these laws that were criminalizing their life. I mean, you talk about people who have been enslaved for hundreds of years, generations of people who only know slavery, and you free them, and then like months, years later, you say, "Oh yeah, if you don't have a job by now, we're just gonna send you to jail and make you a slave again." And it's like you're not doing anything to try and help or anything like that. Everything post slavery was really just a continuation of slavery, but rebranding it every so often.
And they used to actually like lease you out if you were to be like if you're a vagrant, or now you break one of the black codes, they arrest you. You don't just sit in the ball and chain. Like that ball and chain is so you don't leave the field that you're working in. You know, that whole you see like those episodes of SpongeBob where they go to jail and they're breaking the rocks, right? That's what they were doing. That's what they had us doing, like working on the railroads and stuff.
I have to bring that back to now, where you see private prisons like becoming prominent, where they're able to use convict leasing, essentially like renting out people in prison to do like work fast food restaurants. In Arkansas, you see people actually still picking cotton to this day, but it's not black people, it's criminals. But that's what they switched it to, that kind of de facto segregation.
Sundown towns were another prominent use of black codes. These were areas in which local laws were made specifically to bar the activities of African Americans by law. There were many black towns and communities that had begun to thrive and build wealth, in which, time after time, entire towns and cities were burned down and stormed by angry mobs of savage white supremacists. I can think of several to mention, but most notably is the Tulsa or Black Wall Street Massacre in 1921, the Wilmington, North Carolina Massacre and coup of 1898, and the Memphis Massacre of 1866, in which I specifically wanted to get Josh's input on.
I mean, truth be told, people act as if it really didn't happen. It's not to say like, but you don't hear about it as much as you should in your own city. You really might not even hear about it in school. As somebody who's also worked in the schools, kind of crazy to not really hear about it. But you do have places. I was fortunate enough to be at a place where they actually did talk about that and hone in on it. But essentially, it was just another massacre. It was like one day, it's the typical come in one day and pillage everybody's homes, burn them down, kill, destroy, rape the women. I mean, it's like all of it. I mean, it's whole 10 yards. It's like, I'm not familiar on what may have provoked it, but it's always a story that they say behind on like what caused them to initially go in the first place. They'll make up some bogus lie. I mean, the psychology goes deep. You really see it manifest itself today. And also just Red Summer too. Another one of those racist tactics where in the summer of 1919, over 30 cities were bombed, flamed, people were massacred all throughout the U.S. all in like predominantly black towns and really only black towns. They would just come in, destroy, pillage, rape, and just decimate the entire land that they in, displace thousands of families. And it's called Red Summer because of the amount of blood that was shed. It's the summer of 1919, and not too many people know about it. It's quite insane. But you do have stories of resistance, like in Chicago.
Sharecropping was another way to ensure the labor of the Black American labor force for generations after slavery was abolished. Sharecropping was essentially working on a plantation or farm in exchange for a finite amount of share in the crop or supply they labored, though the amounts that were given to these laborers were usually bogus amounts with many, many, many strings attached.
That's the thing about sharecropping. Oftentimes, and even if you were, most of the time it would just keep you in perpetual cycles of debt. Literally, even for generations, you would see it. You saw sharecropping well into the 1930s. Like some people even in the 60s. This is not like something that happened only for a little bit. Like people's families were stuck in these. It's slavery. It was really another form of slavery. Like
Yeah.
they would get faulted if tools were to break. They would get charged high interest rates for having to live there. And like, I mean, it's literally slavery, but instead of just enforcing it, they use it with money.
No, for sure.
As we discussed, a few instances of black towns being massacred by white mobs, these mobs were not solely delegated to taking on entire towns. Many times these were white mobs attacking one black neighborhood, one black family, one black person, even one black child. There were countless public gatherings to watch the lynching of black men, women, and children, and these events became a cultural staple of white America. According to the Negro Yearbook, between 1882 and 1951, approximately 3,500 black people were lynched, meaning executed with no due process. Lynchings could take place by hanging, beating, flogging, or burning. Lynching was only legally deemed a federal hate crime in 2022 and is only punishable by up to 30 years of prison and a fine.
Even like Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, they often didn't even report half of the lynchings anyway because they just that the black life to them was that insignificant. And so this is like what we know about from that time, from
Exactly.
that short time period.
And then after they would actually like go to try to get a body part as a souvenir, and if they couldn't get a body part, they would try to they started making photos, like photographs, little postcards of these lynchings, and that's like basically like how we have what a baseball card is today, right? They used to like pass around these cards of like, oh, I'll trade you this one. I like this picture of this black person hanging more than this other one. Like this is a crazy thing, right? This is fundamentally insane. And I do really want to talk about that, what that does to a child, right? These white children were being exposed to this and what that may do, not to give sympathy to them, but just to understand this is such a huge deal, right?
All throughout the Civil Rights era, there were countless attempts by the US government to sow distrust and chaos amongst black activists and communities. From the assassination of MLK to COINTELPRO invasions in black churches, the weaponization of law and government against black people was more powerful than ever, and we can still see the effects of these strategic and calculated attacks to this very day.
Essentially, Civil Rights era, you have, the whole thing, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act. You have all that happening where seemingly it seems like, okay, for once, black people finally got to win. We've been accepted, regardless of how people view it. A lot of people view that we shouldn't have never tried to be accepted by them. Anyway, I agree. But of course, you're not thinking about that. You can only view that in hindsight. you're thinking that they're actually going to give you a fair chance because you're expecting them to be different when in reality they were pretty much the same. But all in all, Civil Rights Act was kind of that step in the door to be integrated into American society as a whole, receiving equal rights, voting opportunities, and things like that to where it seemingly is fair. But what we see is that we're still kind of being treated the same by people, by society in general. And we have these Black Power movements to try and essentially prevent that. Because, I mean, you got to think about it. 1865 to 1965, that's 100 years. A lot of people who saw Reconstruction, who saw Black codes, who at least were born, lived to see this. And so you got to be skeptical. You got to go in arms because you know the type of pushback that you will receive from having this win for this seeming win for Black people. You see armed resistance group, like not even armed resistance, but they were just social groups that really tried to benefit the community, such as Black Panthers. I mean, even a lot of gangs that came in were simply just like community efforts to really provide better lives for the kids and for the community. You only see that shift after the war on drugs, especially like you talk about Crips and Bloods. They were actually really cool and they did social programs, and so did the Black Panthers, and the Black Panther Party really connected with all kinds of marginalized groups, from the like poor white people. You see the Rainbow Coalition. You're talking about what's the word I'm looking for? A generation of people who are on the uprising to create change globally. I mean, the rest of the world looked at Black America like, we can do this. Because I mean, even if you can see like the Pan-Africanism movement really start to happen around the same time across all African nations, across Black Americans, across our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. You see people like Bob Marley coming about. I mean, like that's really one of my favorite artists, Bob Marley. Yeah. Just like going into what he stood for, he truly stood for like liberation, and he wanted to see all. He even talked about what was going on in like Gaza. Like, I mean, he was talking about that way back then. Like all these things that are so important and tied to the liberation. But we see the Civil Rights Act being kind of at the forefront and showing that change can really happen. And you see these groups, but after that, honestly, in the middle of the civil rights movement, this was adopted, but COINTELPRO essentially came in. This is the same type of basically industry that got MLK assassinated. I mean, like people infiltrating, they're putting CIA plants inside of these progressive movements to basically destroy them from within. They're like, we can't do it from outside. How about we try and go within, like plant seeds of doubt, pay people off to, or like threaten, or even worse, threaten them in their lives and their families.
Now, to get into the meat and potatoes of the discussion, there were so many questions that I had wanted to ask Josh. But first, I want to briefly discuss the many different psychological effects that our people have experienced due to generations of hate, discrimination, and slavery, as well as highlight and discuss the magnitude of our overall reaction to these injustices, as the will and forms of expression that we have forged out of this pain speaks volumes.
Because music is such a powerful thing. It's something that everybody can understand. It's a language that everybody can understand. Everybody can enjoy music. All cultures and ethnicities and countries have their own form of music that they use to express themselves and express what they got going on. As Black people, we're all, like, both of us especially are very rhythmic people anyway, and so it's easier for us to like kind of express ourselves through music and through poetry and through these like expressive forms of even resistance. Like a lot of Black artists made their resistance through music, and because they understood. I mean, even if you look at Michael Jackson, the biopic just came out. And even though they're going to try to paint him in a different light, Michael Jackson was a human rights activist. Like, he was actively fighting for oppressed people across the world. And you saw what, and they're not going to tell you but they know what they did to him. They definitely know what they did to him. And but when you have that type of influence through music, you could change billions of lives. I mean, like you could go to all four corners of the world and people are gonna know who Michael Jackson is. And but because of the influence that he had. And so but you can only really have an influence through music. And especially in our people, we get demonized for it because of how the industry has kind of capitalized off hip hop. But hip hop was used as a form of resistance to white supremacy, to oppression. And people gotta really understand where the roots came from, although they came in and put their money into it and that eventually changed how hip hop would be for decades to come, even to today. But originally, we had public enemy, people who are really fighting the powers that be and actually trying to create change through music. And people are just really able to express themselves through music. I mean, even all the way back to the blues era. People don't know, but like a lot of the genres that black people created came from the blues. I mean, blues turned into rock and roll. Rock and roll expanded into like punk rock, grunge rap. I mean, not grunge bands. Like all these different forms. People would think that black people are only permanent in hip hop, but I mean, we created almost every genre through forms of resistance. We create that through resistance through the system because we've been anti-system always, and so being able to express yourself in that way, but we're not able to express ourselves the same way that we used to because of how the media portrays it. And so when you creative people are going to create regardless. Now it's up to us to decide whether it's going to be positive creations or negative. And that's just how it is. Like, I mean, even if you look, and this is a little off topic, but even if you look into the people who steal in cars, like that's not a hard task, especially if they know how to work the keypad. That's not something that everybody can do. And so although it's negative creation, they're still expressing themselves and they're also able to use their intelligence. People just assume because people aren't book smart that they aren't intelligent, but you gain a lot of knowledge. But that's me getting off topic. But it really just kind of shows that creation is going to happen and resistance is going to happen through music. But it's just about up to us whether it's going to be positive, promoted. I mean, shown positively or negatively.
I have is there's of course generations of pain, trauma that have been inflicted on African Americans and African people in general. In your own words, can you kind of explain, kind of in layman's terms, how generational trauma works and how it presents itself, especially in the African American people as a whole?
So there's actual genes it's real generational trauma is real. It's I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's called like epigenetics. I could be wrong though. I'm gonna have to fact check that. But it's essentially the study of like trauma being passed down through genes. And that's why I talk about things like the innate distrust, that innate fear, or like having the way that your parents treat you. You try not to act like them, but then you end up acting like them in different ways. It's kind of that generational trauma that you have to break through and heal from in order to be able to move forward. And so it literally is passed down through genetics. And then imagine all of your life, all these generations and generations of people being told that they cannot express themselves because they know they'll die for it. Imagine that fear and that baggage doubling, tripling by the generation. And then you constantly being told not to express yourself. You can't have emotions. You can't feel. That's weak. That's soft. You can't do that. Because our ancestors had to toughen up in a real way because they knew that they couldn't be shown as weak to either these slave masters or to just white people in general, having to toughen up while dogs are biting you, while you're getting hosed down by fire hose, while people are spitting in your face, while people are like, I mean, you name it, while this government is like actively dismantling all of your organizations that once helped us, and then while they're actively funneling crack into the communities. You have all these things happening on top of each other where black people really haven't even got a chance to heal. They haven't even got a chance to acknowledge that the wound is there because this country keeps telling them to move forward, forget about it. It's the past. It happened. And they can't even address the wounds that they have. And I'm really just so passionate about this because I really want people to understand that this is not something that's going to be solved overnight. And so if you're expecting overnight results, you're never going to be satisfied. But the work is extremely necessary in this community. And it's extremely necessary that we organize and mobilize across the nation, internationally, globally, actually. Connecting with the African diaspora and really just getting back with them and connecting back to our roots and really trying to get to know our history and know where we came from because it's so important. Because if it wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying to take it away. And that's just me being so real. Like, our ancestors fought hard for us. They didn't. Folks think that just because they were slaves, that they was weak. They were 10, 100, thousands times more stronger than who we are today. They broke their backs and paved the way for us. In the civil rights era, they weren't just a bunch of people who decided to get together. They was one day tired of this. We just gonna sit in. No, they had to train for that. People spitting in your face. People smashing food on you, pouring drinks on you, sending their dogs on you, slapping you in the face, having the police handcuff you, throw you on the ground, send the dogs on you, hose you down with fire hoses, shoot you, kill you.
As we've seen with redlining, the Interstate Highway Act, as we kind of discussed earlier, and now with even the dismantling of the Voting Rights Act, right? What kind of effect do you think these systemic injustices start to take on our people?
And that's so crazy because it never really left. Like, redlining didn't leave. Now it was no longer, oh yeah, we can't give it to you because you're black. It's, oh, we can't give it to you because we can't give you that loan or buy that house because it's in a low risk area. I mean, a high risk area. Or now they don't use skin tone, they use credit score. Now they use how much money you got while systemically creating barriers for you to have financial gain. So, and then they also, to say they're not being racist on job applications is really just up to the employer. I mean, there's all these fake goals that they put in the black community that really didn't mean much, but actually just caused more confusion and hysteria. Because now you're like, everything's equal. Why am I failing? Why is life seems so unfair? What am I doing wrong? But it's really not you doing wrong. It's the system failing you. It's the system telling you you're enough while simultaneously making it harder and harder for you to survive. Putting businesses not shopping there because it's high risk areas, while also systemically creating the conditions for it to be a high risk area. I mean, this is genuinely sick behavior. And then they convince us that this is our fault when we had 200 years of chattel slavery where we literally we were treated as property. We were literally property. They didn't even have enough wherewithal to put names on our graves when we died. They didn't care. They probably would eat us, truth be told.
No, they would. Yeah, there's
literally, or turn our body into furniture.
There's plenty of documented evidence that they engaged in, and that's to get more into that later on, like the psychology behind just like the cruel behavior, this sick and twisted behavior. But they did indeed eat and cook and turn us into clothes. They did. They turned our hair into like
fed us to each other, force fed us to each other. You have, okay, let's say forget slavery. You want to leave slavery in the past? Okay, we leave it in the past. We have another 100 years of Jim Crow and black codes and redlining and the Interstate Highway Act that displaced hundreds of thousands of black families from their generational wealth. That's generational wealth gone down the drain. Housing and actually owning a home is the biggest creator of generational wealth because you now have an asset. you now have something that appreciates in value. Money depreciates. You keep money. You have a house that you bought in 2000, and you have it to 2026. It's probably gonna be triple what it was worth, and that's just from a house. And you're talking about them literally building highways through black neighborhoods to intentionally destroy these homes. Highways. And then on top of that, you have them changing from we can't sell you homes because you're black to we can't sell you homes because you're poor. Because you live in a high risk area. Because that home is in a high risk area, we can't buy that. Oh, you're just not fitting the criteria of what we need at this job. All the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. And they give you the Civil Rights Act and immediately start doing all of that. To make it seem like you really fucked off. Like you really just terrible. Like you really terrible. Like you really not doing nothing for real with your life. And then while they doing all of that, they actively dismantling every single organization that served and protect you because the police weren't doing it. So the Black Panthers did it. So the Rainbow Coalition did it. Then they start killing our leaders. The gangs that used to help these organizations, now they funneling crack into the communities.
Can you kind of talk about what this constant state of survival would do to someone, especially with children, right? These children that grew up in the war on drugs era, during the midnight raids when they were targeting people on welfare, even during like Vietnam, you know, people's fathers being thrown away to war, come back addicted to heroin or alcohol. You know, what would be the psychological effects of this on the household, and especially so the children?
I mean, people don't understand how bad the crack era truly was. Like, the psychological effect is insane. Like, I mean, parents are pawning off their children for crack to get high for 5 minutes. That crack is probably the most addictive thing ever. And it was funneled into black communities intentionally. Man, like these folks are real life sick. They're funneling drugs into communities. So not only are they making drugs off the cartels who are funneling the drugs into these communities, they're profiting off. Man, it's so crazy how they do it, because around the 80s with Ronald Reagan, you also see the rise of private prisons. So not only are they profiting off of the fact that they're smuggling these drugs, they're profiting off the people who are getting locked up for the crack. They are winning. They are playing both sides. They create the problem and try and sell you the cure. I mean, it's genuinely sick, and they profit off of both. But that's capitalism for you. That is capitalism at its finest. Children are like you said. You come up off. You have $50. You said, boom, you in the game off $50 because crack's so cheap. It's kind of like Deontay Kyle said. He was talking like, man, you start off with $50 and come up on a rack in a day. You in the game. Now you can go bigger. And it's so addictive. And the money is too. And so it's like everybody's addicted. The fiends and the people making the money. And it's so crazy. Like, and then you also have to think about the psychological effect of black people knowing that crack is like the worst version of cocaine, but seeing people who have cocaine charges receive less time and lesser punishments for the pure version of a drug. Like, that don't even make sense mathematically, psychologically. It don't make no sense at all. And it's like, how do you have the pure version of something be worth less time? 20 years, 30 years for crack, and people getting 5 years, if that. Results may vary on color.
Can you talk a little bit about how this type of deterioration from specifically incarceration, especially wrongful incarceration, and of course both for the incarcerated but also for a loved one, you know, someone on the outside?
The main effect you have is, well, it's a lot of effects actually. So You have somebody who's wrongfully convicted. This can either go two ways, like three ways, really. They drive themselves insane because, like, they know they're not getting out, but they know they did nothing wrong and they can't cope with it. And then you had a person who gets released, but they're a felon now. Or like it's hard to get a job with a criminal record. So what are you gonna do? Either resort back to crime or give up. And like whatever giving up is, whether that is going back to crime or going to crime or just doing something worse, taking your own life. Like, I mean, this stuff is real. Like, I'm talking about somebody, I know people who are felons who like done hundreds, thousands of applications and getting denied by every single one. And having no connection. People are like, well, it's not about what you, it's about who you know. So what if you don't know nobody? What if everybody died while you was in prison? But you don't think about these things with people like this. You don't think about the fact that they girl died and their son killed himself or got killed or fell into the same life and got incarcerated. And then the rest of the family cut them off. Like, you don't think about stuff like that. They may not have a safety net. Not everybody has a safety net. Having a safety net in itself is a privilege. And so people don't understand. Then you have people who try and do right, and then you get put on parole, probation, 20 years. They looking for you to fuck up. You basically locked in a cage for 20 years. You basically still in prison. You in prison, you could just see outside the walls. You can't do nothing. One infraction, you're gone. You better off just going back to jail. Really? I'm talking about you speeding ticket. Things that we take for granted. Folks be speeding every day, running red lights, riding around with a controlled substance.
Even just being with your friends, you know, like a lot of the time you can't go back to like socializing with people who also have, and so they literally will separate you from your source of joy from everyone. They will try to get you in the worst state of mind possible. Your friends could just be a group of 5-10 black people just on a corner, just posted up, you know, that's looked at as suspicious in a lot of these officers' eyes and a lot of these people's eyes. And so at the end of the day, like, you're really being punished for real for any, like you
existing. The actual prison industrial complex itself and the like psychological effect that it has, because it's not a rehabilitation center. But I don't know if you ever like noticed some federal prisons, especially where the white collar crimes are at. I mean, like, I know a guy, he did some years in fed time for a white collar crime, and like they're able to walk out and do whatever they want to, have multiple changes of clothes, like for stealing billions of dollars. But it wasn't through theft; it was through scams and fraud, color crime.
Even just looking at Epstein, the whole Epstein case unfold, he was released on a work order from his sentence. He could leave 6 out of 7 days of the week. Jeffrey Epstein could, and he did, and he victimized women or girls. He victimized girls during that time. Yeah. Having police officers come and act as his personal like escort, his personal chauffeur. They would drive him around. They would even, like, the police would be wearing civilian clothes. They'd be dressed in like a suit or something at the door, letting people up into Epstein's apartment. I think up to 13 women or girls, 13 little girls who had come forward, and they still only charged him on one. They gave him the greatest deal they possibly could, charged him with one count of soliciting sex from a minor, and then let him leave jail 6 out of 7 days of the week.
Life on the wrist.
That's crazy. That is ridiculous.
There's people locked up from the 80s for a little 3-5.
I wanted to ask you about the misrepresentation of Black people and how negative stereotypes affect individuals who are prone to these accusations.
Good question. But being racist in 2026 is so insane. I cannot believe that we even still having this conversation. Because honestly, Black people don't care. Truth be told, most Black folks don't even care. We got our own problems to worry about. But they always bothering us looking at these same 10 videos in circulation talking about this is why Black people shouldn't have rights. They out here chimping out, acting like monkeys. And it'd be the same few videos. Bro, we don't care because majority of us don't even act like that. The majority of white people are racist, and if they're not racist, they're complicit in the system. Seeing Chud the Builder get shot was peak entertainment. I love that so much. He cheddar bobbed himself. He didn't get shot. He cheddar bobbed himself. I'm hoping that the Black guy has a speedy recovery, that he shot. Really hoping that everything's all right. Prayers up to you. But overtly, give them the same energy that they give you. I'm tired of all this kumbaya, take the high road. If you interact with a Karen, give them the exact same energy. Start screaming for help in their face and being like, I'm being attacked. Reverse the roles. Because these folks, that's demonic. I don't even understand how you can sit here and be racist in 2026. After all that Black people have been through, especially if you old and racist. Because you was doing it. And if you weren't doing it, you for sure saw it.
Now, a question you may have found yourself asking throughout the duration of this video is, what prompted these people to act in such deplorable ways? What was it that allowed for whiteness to exhibit such horrific racism for no good reason other than to justify chattel slavery? Throughout this next half of the video, we're going to be discussing both the psychology behind being a racist as well as the psychological effects that are embedded in racist societies. That being said, I wanted to ask Josh what the psychological damage that one would go through when seeing such a graphic public execution of an innocent person.
Not only were they seeing it, this was normalized. Like this was like they was like the barbecue. Like they were there like yeah, you trying to go, we having a public lynching at about 7:30 sharp. 7:30 p.m. sharp. You want to come out with you and the kids? Throw some on the grill. We might throw them on the grill after they die. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like that's literally how they're discussing this. It's so crazy. Like it was just normal to them. Like this was like a fair. Like they treat that like an attraction. But that's also how they view Black bodies and the psychological effect that it has on the children. That like this is being normalized. They're watching Black people getting burned, tarred, feathered, getting lynched. They're getting burned and lynched alive, and then having their genitals cut off and given to people as souvenirs. You're talking about 5-6-year-olds watching this. Inherently, whether or not they want to admit it, they're going to view Black people as inferior because they're being taught as such. Once again, I'm not sympathizing because I don't care about none of that. Be better. Do better.
What kind of mindset do you think has to be built as a collective to allow this type of behavior? Obviously, we're naturally empathetic. So why do you think this kind of extreme violence was not only tolerated, but celebrated?
Capitalism. They have to convince you that Black bodies are inferior, or Black bodies are superior, but Black minds are inferior in order to justify chattel slavery. And we send them to the field work because they're strong like that. They're built for that type of labor. While actively forcing them to do the labor to build them for that type of labor. It's crazy. And then you talk about in order to make this atrocity somewhat justifiable in your head, because deep down you know that you're sick and you're definitely gonna go wherever you believe in the afterlife. You're going to the worst part of it, because I mean you're talking about feeding babies to alligators, black babies to alligators, telling black people that they're lazy while making them do all the field labor, telling black women that they're not adequate enough while having them raise your children. I mean, this is like sick reverse psychology going on here. To also convince black people that they are inferior, because deep down inside, those white people knew that we are some of the most powerful beings on this planet. Point blank, period. And so you have to convince yourself that not only what you're doing is justified, but what you're doing is right. Which is why you have like colonialism run so rampant, because deep down in their minds, they're like, I'm civilizing. Well, deep down in their minds, they know that they're messed up, but they're telling themselves, I'm civilizing these people. That's why I'm coming here and pillaging their village, destroying their entire way of life, committing atrocities on the women and the children, killing the men. I'm doing all these things to civilize them, to teach them how to behave, when they knew how to behave long before you stepped foot on that island or that land, that plot of land, whatever you want to call it, long before, had entire civilizations while y'all were going through the dark ages. And that part right there is really what be blowing me. One thing I did want to talk about very briefly, which I think is quite interesting if people want to put two and two together. The Moors conquered Spain from, what was it, like 711 AD to 1492. They conquered them for that long. And it's ironic enough that something else happened in 1492 that also happened to trigger slave trade. And I'm not going to say that they saw what we had and wanted it for themselves, but I can say that the timeline is quite interesting. It's very interesting. And so they knew exactly who we are. They know exactly who we are. That's why they try so hard to make us forget. And that's the craziest part about racism, and like how insane you have to be. Like, the things that we want to implement literally benefit everybody, even the rich. It's literally cheaper to do what we want and provide adequate housing, adequate health care, adequate finances, paying people livable wages, providing good transportation systems, subways. All of this will be cheaper than creating a surplus of everything and hoarding the wealth and hoarding all the resources. It'll be easier to just do all of that for everybody. But they're so sick and twisted. And these billionaires and these elitists are so sick and twisted that they make our life harder for the fuck of it, essentially. Like, because they're that sick and twisted.
There was a shift in the nature of how everything went to where they had to start dehumanizing people of color to make their acts seem like justifiable. And so at a certain point, especially when you bring entertainment and like the memification of kind of black culture and the imitation of it, it makes it easier to do. It makes it a joking point. It makes it a talking point. And it's something that you can laugh about and laugh at, especially back then when they could just do that freely, because at that time, either they were slaves, either they were sharecroppers. There wasn't a lot of wiggle room with black people then. That's what topic for another time, but it wasn't much that black people can do at the time in order to combat that. You had the organizations, but it was also just like the disdain that they had towards African Americans, and it was truly sick that people justify. Even if you look at Birth of a Nation, I mean, the president literally called it the greatest movie ever. Like it
That's
was like writing history with lightning or something like that. And I mean, that's just so insane that a movie essentially not even essentially dehumanizing and like painting black people in such a bad light. The president of the United States is like, yes, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. And this was one of the most progressive presidents. And it's like once you realize how all of these things tie in, if the most progressive president, one of the most progressive presidents in US history was still racist, well, like imagine the atrocities that the other ones would have committed. And imagine what they let slide. And it's just you really gotta it starts to make sense once you look at it from that perspective because you kind of tell yourself that black people are inferior and that they're dumber, and then you put conditions in them. You put these conditions on them to kind of generate these stereotypes. Like it's so sick, and then they call black people lazy when they literally use them as slaves. It's like all these contradictions and hypocrisies that they have in black people is so insane, and so they have to like justify their sick and vile acts by creating conditions for them to fit these stereotypes to justify dehumanizing them. And so it all just really ties in. Yeah, and I think that's what people need to start understanding is that they think that these racist people are like deep in the country, second grade education level. Like, I mean, even I don't know if you saw this with what's his project, the creator of Project 2025, Heritage Foundation. I think the founder, he literally had a PhD
yes.
in like African American studies and wrote a whole dissertation on how they use religion to like manipulate. It was like they use something to manipulate black people, and then he does all of this. Like these are not people who are dumb, and I really want people to understand that. Like these are some of the most vile, smartest, sick people on the planet. Like this is not a bunch of ragtag. This ain't the 1776. This is like 2026, 250 years later,
For sure.
250 years of hidden knowledge that they've kept from the public. Now they understand how the world works. Now they're using it to manipulate us. And then they release these documents decades later talking about, yeah, we mass manipulated y'all. Yeah, we actually we actually was poisoning y'all water. Yeah, we actually sprayed chemicals on y'all and killed y'all. We dropped bombs on these towns. We actually destroyed like there are all these things that they come forth about years later that people call a conspiracy. And it's like, what do you want us to do now with that information?
One question that had really piqued my curiosity was the actual thought process that comes with true and genuine hatred for someone. I wanted to ask what exactly happens to someone psychologically when they develop a hatred for someone and the greater context that it plays in the terms of the psyche.
I mean, it would be like almost perceiving somebody as a threat the entire time. Like, oftentimes, especially when you see in hate or like jealousy, they're constantly looking at the next person because they're perceiving them as a threat to whatever thing they may be holding on to or trying to achieve. They're a threat to that. And so it's kind of like you're always on the edge and always on the defense. And I'm not like too in depth with the hate of it. I'm not gonna lie. Like not the hate, but like how deep it goes into psychology. It's kind of my stuff's very kind of like surface level, but I know it. I know it does perceive it all like for changes your mind to perceive someone as a threat, and then that way it kind of like domino effects into all of these different actions and thoughts that you may have about a certain person.
Okay, so you're saying it comes from like a place of kind of like jealousy, feeling threatened. So would you say it's
I mean,
kind of like an inferiority complex kind of thing, or like a superiority
almost,
complex?
yeah, either or. I mean, you can. I know you said not necessarily in race, but like you notice that a lot of these things, like as far as colonialism, start to happen after the Moors uh go to Europe from Africa. Like you
Mhm.
notice a lot of like, I mean, if you even like I told you, like the day that I think it was Spain, not Spain, it may have been Spain, but as soon as they conquered the Moors, that was the same year that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America, and which led to all of these things. And it's kind of, I mean, like I said, the irony of the time is enough in itself to let you know the intentionality of it, of all of this that they're doing. Like especially now, you have some people who like do it for the love of the game. Like they're openly, overtly racist. Like they they kind of just they'll throw the hard R at you. They'll like they might spit on you. Like they don't care at all, and they believe that they're justified in their racism. But then you have even the more dangerous person who sees it and understands that it's racism, but does nothing about it. And I feel like that's the worst type because they'll tell you it's wrong. They know it's wrong. They'll say it to your face, be like, "Oh yeah," but they'll tell us that it's wrong. But they'll go back to the communities where these people who are actively being racist and do nothing about it. And the psychology behind that is just like viewing us as inferior inherently. Because I mean, the same way you can argue with, not even argue, the same way that black people have generational trauma, like it's kind of like a reverse thing for them. They've kind of been taught at this point, not even taught, it's like something that you got to unlearn, but you kind of been taught to view black people as inferior, like because they tell you I'll be hard on criminals, and then what is the media, who does the media only show and portray as these criminals? It's black people. So like they're hard on that. They teach them like anti-drugs. They kind of say don't go to these areas because it's dangerous, which also ironically are kind of majority black areas. And they kind of, and it just shows they just use a new name for racism now. It's kind of just like they tie it to your socioeconomic status essentially. But in all, it's the same thing because the country creates the conditions for black people to fit the stereotypes of these socioeconomic statuses. And so you kind of have to teach, that's it's something that's taught, but it's also something that can be passed down. I feel like just because it's trauma. I mean, you convincing yourself, you're watching, like you're eating another black human, you're eating a human being, like you're practicing cannibalism, you're feeding these babies to alligators, you're sexually assaulting the women and children and the men, you're cutting off their genitals, cutting off their limbs, you're burning them alive, skinning them, hanging them. Like, and time over time, you have to convince yourself to prevent yourself from going insane that these people are inferior because it's insanity to do these acts. I mean, literally treating us as cattle, having literal breeding farms. I don't know if you know that, but like
Mhm.
they had actual breeding farms where they're breeding black people to build the strongest, quote unquote, strongest slave, most suitable slave. Like this is an entire economic system that people don't understand. This is how it acted. Like this is an entire economic system. This is an ecosystem. They have entire departments for specific type of slaves. Like this is somebody's lifestyle. And so for generations, you're having to convince yourself that black people are inferior to prevent yourself from going insane. It's like that's the only way I can really describe it because I couldn't do that. You have an innate like empathy. You have that. Every human has that, like that innate sense of empathy. Now it can be taught to be kind of withered away based on experiences, but you have to convince yourself that they're not. I mean, they treat their dogs with more empathy than they would a black person, and that's says enough.
As powerful and widespread as the Klan or other white supremacist groups were in the past, these organizations were still ultimately led outside of the public eye. In the middle of the night, these Klan members or hate groups would come together and sow seeds of hatred, planned coup d'etats, or at the worst, storm and attack black cities overnight. Nowadays, these rallies are held out in the open in the form of Turning Point USA events or other similar meetings of much greater magnitude. In your opinion, what do you think has created or led up to such absurd ideas as the Great Replacement Theory?
I mean, it's essentially projecting. Like, I mean, even if you notice with like Christian nationalism and like their emphasis, they're coming in to do the Muslims are coming in to do Sharia law. I mean, as they're actively putting in Christian nationalist policies that benefit their agenda in the same way that Sharia law would benefit Muslim extremists. Because this is the extreme Christian nationalism is the extreme version of Christianity. It's like, so the projection piece is really the aspect, and they also kind of understand innately, especially the ones who believe in it, that their ancestors did terrible things, like genuinely. Like, I mean, you're talking about on a global scale, not just in Africa, but like in Asia. And like, I mean, whether you're talking about China, whether you're talking about India, I mean, it's still all of these things that like where they essentially killed off all the indigenous people. And you notice that all across the world, this is a global thing where they're murdering and like killing off the indigenous people. I mean, we're just talking about America, but this was a global thing. And so innately they understand that this is some sick stuff that happened. And so in order to prevent uprising, because they know that one day their time is coming, instead of actually creating a world that benefits everybody, they just try to destroy us before we destroy them, even though nobody thinks like that. But it's the projection aspect that allows them to like psychologically justify it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're kind of saying. How essentially it doesn't matter if it's a religious difference, or especially because heavy on the Muslims and like Islamic, like you said with the Sharia law, the Christian nationalism and the rise of Christian nationalism in America has become very absurd, right? It's given way for so many different absurd laws and bills to be passed or even considered, right? Executive orders,
Yeah.
the dismantling of DEI by Trump, these things. These people know they're not just targeting Black Americans, like we had discussed earlier. When state violence is possible against one group, they might have started with Black Americans first, but it quickly has encompassed all of Americans, right? Even they, like you said, kind of they'll shoot themselves in the foot if that means they can somehow hurt us, somehow hurt any other group, right? They really will.
It's essentially like, I mean, when you really break it down on a level to try and get people to understand, so effectively what they've just done is they committed all of these atrocities, created a kind of gilded bill that, or a gilded act that kind of made everybody feel like we were equal, put things in place like the war on drugs and kind of the mass incarceration to perpetuate Black people negatively, and then to justify like slavery and the acts that they've done, kind of lure people into being racist, and then telling everybody to forget about slavery just to effectively reverse everything, to kind of reset the clock back, to push a new age of Jim Crow. And I say all of that to say, like, they know exactly what they're doing, and they try to act like they don't, and try to act like it's not what it is, when they know the people that are getting disproportionately affected by these bills, by these laws that are put in place, by what's going on across the world. And you can't really turn a blind eye anymore with social media out. So like you're at a point now where you either have to You're either gonna be on the right side of history or on the wrong side of history. And they're trying to erase that aspect of how bad they were to kind of downplay. I mean, even you see in Prager, they were like, being a slave is better than is better than being dead. I don't know if you saw that. It was like a, you know what I'm talking about?
You said
It was like
PragerU.
with Christopher Columbus. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
I know
like with
exactly what
Christopher
you're talking about.
Columbus, and then
Slavery is as old as time. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no? I don't see the problem.
they were saying like being a slave is better than being dead, but they don't go in depth of how bad chattel slavery really was. I mean, and even in the curriculums in these southern states, they don't really talk about how bad slavery was. Like there's people in Texas who who were unaware of like Tulsa massacres, like even all across the country, things like this aren't getting talked about, and they just made it seem like slavery ended and we're all equal. That was it, but they don't really talk about Jim Crow because of how they've kind of whitewashed history to kind of like desensitize everybody to it to make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it actually was, just so they could kind of mass manipulate everybody. I mean, this is like. And once again, when I talk about these aren't just dumb people who decided to conspire one day to take over the government. This is an entire intricate plan that has been going on for decades, centuries maybe. Yeah, but you don't know if you want to fall down that rabbit hole.
No,
So it's
yeah.
like, and it's like these aren't stupid people. These are some of the most intelligent minds. They're just not using their intelligence for good. I mean,
something when you mentioned that, something that I like that came to mind yesterday was how there was a whole like kind of branch of Epstein's associates who were these are scientists, these are geneticists, these are very top of their field, very accomplished scientists that have gained an interest in such sick and obscene things such as what's the eugenics, and that if you look more into like what Epstein was doing, especially like down in New Mexico in his ranch, this was a eugenics project. He was close with so many different eugenicists, so many different scientists that were helping him research the idea that his sperm was superior, right? Because a lot of what they believed was that Jeffrey Epstein was this, or what he himself believed, right, was that he was a genius, right? He perceived himself as this genius whose mind needs to be spread through his seed. In who no one thinks about shit like that except for these people. You know what I mean? These people really are fascinated and enthralled with the idea that your parents, your family, your history makes you better. In which that's not ever gonna be true. You might like have a better chance because your parents were rich, but that's a socioeconomic status. That's not eugenics. You know what I mean? And so to kind of push black people and just people in general, for colonialism to suppress and oppress these people for so long, to only then be like, oh look, we're better than them. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep reproducing. And it's like they don't take into account that we would all be like damn near the same if we were all in the same conditions, if we all had the same upbringing, if we all had that's where you'd be able to find.
I mean, you even saw that like in a lot of these towns, the reason why they were destroyed is because they were thriving, like, and they didn't need to, even through segregation and the racism and the lynchings, black people were still having thriving towns and booming businesses and happy families and speakeasies and clubs and still popping shit and still kicking it throughout all the adversity, so much adversity that they were facing. And that's really like demonic for a lot to be racist. Like seeing black joy and your first thought is, how can I ruin it? This doesn't sit right with me. I don't like this. Like that's demonic. Like there's no other way to put it really. Like somebody else's joy shouldn't bring about your sorrow, especially with what what they had going on, the lynchings. Like, people were getting lynched daily. I mean, you talk about Red Summer, where, I mean, there's hundreds of casualties and different incidents across America where there was racial violence. I mean, in one summer, like, this is sick stuff going on, and people act like it's smaller than what it is. It's a big issue.
And to kind of get back to the Christian nationalism and how they perpetuate racism, I want to ask, why do you think this thought process is so easy to fall into, especially when they preach ideals such as love thy neighbor?
Because of segregation, socio-economic segregation. Like, I mean, you talk about, like, everything being desegregated, but they simply just changed the playing field to socioeconomic status and gave white people the advantage. So love thy neighbor doesn't look black, it looks white. And then you talk about simple terms in Christianity, such as, like, white being pure, black is darkness and death and sorrow, and whiteness is holy and uplifting and perfect and stainless. It's like, you know what I'm saying? All these, like, subtle terms that people don't really think about, that subconsciously influence the mind to view black people as inferior, as stained. I mean, even if you talk about with the Mormons, like, I know we're not talking about, but that was like one of them first things where you kind of saw black people essentially were the devil. Like, because they couldn't choose, they were cursed for eternity. And then you kind of see stuff like that happen all throughout history. And so it's easy to do that when your neighbor looks exactly like you. And they tell you, oh, don't go to that neighborhood. Oh, those are bad people. This is a bad place. Or don't talk about race. And all these, like, things, and not explaining and not attempting to even understand why the world is the way it is. And then you see how they portray us globally. They portray us as, like, these poor, helpless people in Africa. I mean, there's, like, they essentially pillaged the entire continent of Africa for its resources and destroyed all of the infrastructure that we had, showing that we were significantly more advanced than Western civilizations. And I mean, like, you just talk about the entire dismantling and the disrespect, and all of that just ties into place to Christian nationalism. And it's simply it's so much propaganda that you're kind of having to go through. And especially when you talk about looking at black people as a spectacle, you talk about these mission trips and trying to save, like, these indigenous people, not even just in Africa, but, like, you see a lot of going, like, Honduras, and, like, where you're trying to save them through the gospel, through conditions that Western countries are creating. So you're sending people over from those countries. Yeah, but it's like they don't really think about it like that. But you're sending people over from those countries who are creating the conditions for them to live in poverty, and telling them that Christianity is going to save them, and not the fact that their government is, like, destroying their economy and is essentially a figurehead for the West. And it's just all of it is connected. I mean, that's it.
Going through the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. Why do you think it is that white Americans specifically respond to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter, or with Blue Lives Matter?
Simply because, like, to them, when they say, like, it's always been, like, that's what I'm saying, it's that projection piece. Because when they said white lives matter, they meant, oh, we're superior. KKK, all these pro-white movements, Proud Boys, where they're pro-white and anti everybody else. And historically, pro-black movements have always been pro-LGBTQ, pro-poor. They're pro-common people. They're pro anti-capitalism, pro-communism. Like, they're not even racist, they're anti-racist. And so it's like all these pro-black movements that have been created throughout history that have kind of been whitewashed into these kind of like terrorist groups, where in reality they were like having social programs. They were feeding the poor. They were doing all these things. Like, and it's crazy that people I have to defend you saying Black Lives Matter, because historically and kind of like deep down inside, when I say white lives matter, I'm anti-black. And it's like exploring that, always having a kind of projection and projecting how their interpretations on you, when pro-black has nothing to do with anybody being anti-white or anti-anybody. Rather, it just means historically this country has shown that my black life is insignificant, and I want to let everybody know that I have the same amount of power and equality as everybody else, and I'm deserving of that. That's all
Word.
that means. And so, but they can't fathom that because, like I said, historically, KKK, Proud Boys, you have it's like Knights of something. It's just another
Mm.
racist organization. I mean, just slavery itself, all of it, like, has been anti-black. This country has been anti-black, and it was normalized. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay. And with someone who kind of maybe has a more nuanced understanding of the human mind, or at least in terms of these type of groups, why do you think that the rise in right-wing sentiment worldwide is starting to take over?
Kind of that white denial aspect of where it's kind of like they've listened to this history of how they've done all these horrible things, and they have people like Nick Fuentes and Ben Shapiro being like, they're just saying that like everybody did slavery. They just want us to feel bad because they hate us. They don't like us. Look at how black people act today. Look at how all these indigenous people act today. They act like savages, and they wonder why they had to be colonized. Like, and so they're playing into that insecurity, into that fear that like, why did my ancestors do these things, and why do it feel like I'm being punished for it, when in reality you're not being punished for it. You're just be asking to fight the fight and stop the system. But apparently, like, uh, people are scared of accountability, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just like playing into that, to their negative emotions, to where they kind of don't feel guilt for it anymore. And then, like I said, you have the media portraying black people in negative light, feeding into these stereotypes that they're hearing on these podcasts, that they're hearing on their social media feed. Then you have people like Chud the Builder. Ah, man, I'm just so glad that he finally, like, just once again, I'm just so happy about that. But all in all, like, you have people playing into those stereotypes and trying to race bait people, and like, whenever they see a black person angry, they're like, that's why they can't do this and that. Like, always having black people under a microscope. But then when you talk about mass shootings, and like when you bring up who commits majority of statutory rapes, who does like all these other things, and it's a individual thing, not a group thing. But black people are judged as a whole rather than the individual, and they can't even look at our conditions and socioeconomic statuses and act like it play a factor.
Because these things don't happen in a vacuum. There's a reason. They always like to touch on, crime, being tough on crime, the war on drugs, war on crime, but they don't want to actually. It's not about prevention, right? Because if this was about drug prevention or crime prevention, we would see black people be uplifted, right? If they were truly anti-crime, anti poverty, then they would fix the issue. But instead, they want to announce war, right? They literally will declare war on us before trying to extend a hand. And it's not even like we're trying to mediate, right? We're not even trying to like discuss, come to agreement. We just need help. and instead of
Yeah.
extending that help to us, they would rather. It's like when you see those movies
And
where
I'll
they
say,
where they stomp on their fingers and they fall off the cliff.
I was gonna say, like, even you saw that in, I don't know if you watched the Hurricane Katrina documentary, where like police are literally like watching black people lose their homes, all of their food, all their documents, and they're walking up and like shooting them in the face. Like, I mean, this is just modern day slavery, modern day execution. Like hundreds of bodies unaccounted for. Police riding around, like you call a white family, like Kanye said it on the news back then when he was talking about Bush. It was like you see a white family in the water trying to get food and water. You call them like heroes and saviors, but a black family doing the same thing, you call them looters and demonize them. It's kind of like just this. And then that plays, and then like, all of them watch Fox News and that's all they watch. So Fox tells them they spin it one way and they believe it because it's the news and you should trust the news because the news is always right. When they literally, it's like hundreds of videos out on the internet where like 10 different news sources spin the same situation a different way. And it's just depending on what you watch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why like algorithms are so dangerous because it kind of shapes, it already feeds into the narratives in your head and make those narratives a reality for you, even though it's false.
Definitely.
So yeah.
I know earlier we kind of discussed on internalized racism, but we do see a lot of Black and now, especially with ICE, we see a lot of Hispanic people as well, openly kind of declaring their allegiance with Trumpism, with Christian nationalism, with ICE. And what I kind of just want to get a good explanation of exactly what this internalized racism is. What kind of gives way and what perpetuates this internalized racism, especially knowing that so many of these people have experienced racism or have experienced being oppressed by the hands of their colonizer or the government.
And it's either one of fear or self-hatred. And the fear aspect is like, I'm scared of my life. Let me try and assimilate to kind of blend in and camouflage so I can protect myself. And then over time, you kind of just believe that you are one of them and you're not. But on also another aspect, which is like majority of people, I believe, is the self-hatred. Like, I am uncomfortable with myself, so I'm going to try and shape myself to be somebody else, to be more accepted in society instead of just loving who you are innately and trying to build on that. And it's easier to do that because it's really easier to do that because you don't have to kind of come face to face with yourself. You can kind of be who people want you to be, what society wants you to be. But it's harder to come face to face with yourself and actually look at the person in the mirror, try and grow. So yeah, I mean, it's either one of those two.
I wanted Josh to elaborate on the refusal of closure and what refusing to give someone closure, what kind of this gaslighting that he had spoken about in one of his TikToks, what this can do to a person, to a society, to a community, and to kind of explore that topic a little bit.
I mean, you start to see it now. Like a lot of people just kind of don't believe it or kind of whitewash their brain because, like, I mean, slowly over time, you keep getting told a lie. Eventually, you start to believe it's the truth, and after generations after generations, the truth will be a faint memory, and everybody else will have this distorted reality of what actually went on. And we're seeing it now, which is why everybody like, man, why I care about slavery? That was 200 years ago, or like that's. I mean, you see it on both sides, like spectrum, and so it's kind of just that you constantly getting told a lie, and at some point you're going to believe it. And so people are kind of at the point where they just start to believe the lie, and because to prevent themselves from going insane, because they've been told it so many times, even though deep down they know that what they've been told is a lie, but they do it to prevent themselves from going insane.
401k. Why do you think it is that, or Americans in general, are reluctant or even hateful towards social systems, socialism? What do you think the reason is that the hatred and the disdain for socialism in America?
Because black people would be included. I really do feel like that's the end all be all. Because I mean, if they put old white lady on as the face of welfare, which that's really what it is, but if they actually put the real perpetuator of social programs on the front, people would be significantly more willing to help. But everybody thinks welfare queens, the AI video where the big black lady talking about food stamps and stealing food stamps and all that. That's what they think of in their mind when they think social programs. So therefore they aren't willing to help. Even though that's literally probably less than 0.01% of people on welfare. And it's so insane. But like once again, this goes back to the point of me saying they would rather shoot themselves in their own foot and like live with black people. I mean, and like actually want black people to have the same resources. It's crazy.
Ultimately, how you walk away and choose to live your life after the fact is not up to the abuser, but up to you. I wanted to ask Josh what exactly we can do to minimize, limit, and help heal the psychological damages that our people have gone through over generations of pain and suffering, again, after slavery.
White people aren't willing to kind of do their part in mending racism because they don't believe it's their job to do, the same way they don't believe they should help people who are less fortunate, or like, and that plays to the bigger thing of capitalism of like, it's my money, I earned it, I get to do what I want with it, I don't need to help the next person. Well, we need to start thinking more of a social, from an aspect of socialism. But things that black people need to start doing is, number one, just go to therapy, man. Like, I mean, we talk about all these atrocities, like people dropping like flies in the hood, like people getting their cars stolen, getting laced, drugged, kidnapped, just shot at, hearing gunshots, seeing friends, family die, mama outliving her kids, father being in prison 50 years. And you talk about the psychological effects of that. I mean, we still ain't healed from slavery just for them to throw war on drugs on us. And we can't even heal from that. Because now they throwing AI data centers. So it's like, man, what do you like? How do you do? But it first starts with just having a conversation. And I feel like where a lot of new people drop the ball is just not listening to the next generation and assuming that because you've been through it, you understand what they going through. And it's kind of because it kind of talk condescending to them, to where like they don't really feel comfortable expressing how they feel because you automatically assume that you know, but you don't. So it really just starts with a conversation and actually be willing to help. Everybody wants to talk about gun violence and like how bad these kids are, but don't nobody want to talk to them either.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of just left them for dead, gave up on them, and wonder why they act like they don't care. And wonder why they don't care about nothing. Wonder why they have nothing to live for. Because y'all gave up on them. That's why they act the way that they do. There's always gonna be some who just give up who are gonna do it regardless. But a lot of these kids, because these are kids who are doing this, just need somebody to talk to. Just needed somebody to understand their pain and their struggle. And then nobody want to do it, so they turn to the streets, where everybody understood their pain and their struggle. Everybody understood what they was going through, because everybody didn't seen it, everybody didn't lived it. And then they start getting mixed in with the wrong crowd. And then at that point it's too late. So the thing just starts with a conversation and actually trying to understand your child and not just assuming that you know because you think you've been through it.
Mm-hmm. Over the span of our conversation, one thought persisted to remain in my head, And that was the idea, that in order to justify these injustices being brought against our people, we were criminalized. The overall adultification and criminalization of Black people in America stems from this long string of denial, in which is not only unequivocally false, it is also more damaging than many people may know. And it truthfully stems from this documented history of racism, but I think it was exacerbated in the throughout the war on drugs, the crack era. I think Reagan and subsequent presidents were able to criminalize Black people en masse by waging war against our communities, waging war against poverty, waging war against drugs, waging war against crime. And these aren't things that need to be fought with war, but repaired by society. We should be using our resources to help disenfranchised communities all over America. Yet, time and time again, we allow our government to criminalize them and to really get away with whatever they want. What do you think we as Black people in our community can help do to minimize the damage that is done from these groups, such as white nationalists, white Christian nationalists that are attacking us, declaring a cultural war against us? What are some things that you think we can do to help minimize the damage that's done specifically from these communities raising arms against us?
I'm not saying raise arms against them, but FAFO, you know? But honestly, really though, focus on ourselves. Like, they just be barking. Now, if they bite, that's why we need to focus on ourselves, and actually organize as a community and kind of build this rapport with each other and get back to the good days of like actually having a community and like creating resources for these kids, having aftercare programs and shops where people can learn trades and kind of a big community. Bring back the barbershops. Stop doing the in-house house clients. Start bringing back barbershops. Start bringing back these spaces where like Black people can express themselves freely and we could just have conversations, kind of these safe zones, free of violence and any like street nonsense. And start bringing these back. Start protecting the women and children again. Start just caring for each other. Start having empathy and start building on that. And then we can focus on self-defense training and learning how to bear arms and learning how to fight. Then we can focus on growing. Like, first we focus on growing our own food. That's the best thing we can do as a people. Because if we don't turn this election November, we're going to be in for a very, very rough road for a very long time. So I feel like that's very important, is learning how to grow our own food. But second, building a community and just trying to be there for each other. While these groups, there's no sense of us continuing to fight when these groups are trying to kill us and they hate us. It just doesn't make sense. So I think that we should just try and stick together as a community globally with the African diaspora, just and getting them acquainted and trying to like build a community globally, internationally, and actually showing empathy and caring for one another and understanding how all of our struggles are interconnected, how colonialism is a world problem. It's not just fixated on one continent or one country. It's a global thing. And then really starting to stand in solidarity with one another. That's the best way to fix it. Political parties, race, skin tone, gender, religion, sexuality, age, nationality, ethnicity, like all these divides that kind of like where they try and create division in between us to sow a seed of distrust. And then they manufacture the parties that they tell you to pick, while secretly all these party leaders are best friends and they tell us to hate each other. And so I just really want to just talk about how important it is to spread love and kind of, you don't have to snake your friend. You don't have to snake anybody. Like, we all can win. We would have not been put on this earth if it did not mean that there was an abundance of resources for everybody. we just simply would not be here. It wouldn't be possible. But there's enough resources for everybody to live and survive. And so I just really want to say that. I can't lie.
Yeah, but this was a good discussion. I definitely next time I'm not even gonna like really write down too many questions. We're gonna have to sit down and just discuss some topics sometimes.